Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Today we are working on our Mk4 Prototype, and we're getting ready to get all of the parts assembled that we need to take with us over to Jeff Miller so we can get the body put on this thing for the final time. I think what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through clearancing all of the holes for the hinge assemblies, both for the trunk and for the hood. And we'll take a look at the door latches. Now these are going to be for the old door latches that Factory 5 used to provide, not the new door latches that they're producing themselves. But there's still probably a few Mark III and early Mark IVs that are still using the older style door latches. And so I want to make sure that all of you know how to make these operate more easily and how to modify them so that the handle doesn't become dislodged. All right, we are really busy here around the shop. We've got a bunch of projects going on besides the actual prototype that we've been working on. I'm going to turn on another light here, see if we can't increase the, there we go. So for instance, on the parts side of it, we've been working on our turn signal switch, which we're going to start selling here really quick. That'll be for both the Mark IVs and for the Type 65 coupes. And I've got a drop box right now that I'm doing for a customer in Colorado. So if you're watching this, Dan, your drop box is all done. It just needs to be packed up when we pack up your turn signal switch, and that'll be on their way to you. Also, I'm getting stuff ready for our trip over to Jeff Miller. So this won't apply to a lot of you guys because now you're going to be getting the new door latches from Factory 5. But I've taken the door latches apart. These are the older style, and I've removed the spring. There's a spring right here that goes between this part of the hook on the latch into this hole right here. And it's a secondary spring to bring the latch back into place as you activate to open the door latch. And we've just found that it's not necessary. It makes the door handle much more susceptible to breaking. And so rather than, or bending for that matter, so rather than keeping that spring on there, what we do is we make sure that we lubricate all of the mechanism in here really well before it goes on the car for the first time. And then what I did on these, because these right out of the box, the actual handles are pressed on to this little hub at the bottom. And the driver's side, which is this one, was loose right out of the box. And so I just figured that it would be best to go ahead and do the modification on these right away so that we wouldn't have to come back and address these later, or the actual car owner wouldn't have to address these later. So all this is it's a carriage bolt that we run through the back of the door latch. And I don't know why these are different. We used to use a 5/16 carriage bolt. I wasn't able to get a 5/16 carriage bolt, the square end of it, to fit in the latch like they used to. And so I dropped it down to a 1/4 inch. So I've got that in there. You can see they're long, and I've just got them in with regular machine nuts right now. This will get cut off, and then a nylock nut will go on there. And there's a couple of washers here. The bigger washer goes around the outside to hold the actual latch handle portion onto the hub. And then a smaller washer goes on top of that to hold the whole thing together. And like I said, this will get cut off and it'll all fit behind the cover. So I'm working on getting those all squared away. And then of course I've got all of the other parts that I've got to get together for the Mk4 Prototype before it goes to Jeff Miller to get the body put on for the final time. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to remove the 2 screws. Now these are just 2 regular flathead standard type screws. You're going to remove those and pull the cover off. Now this one's already been modified. So basically what we're going to do is, as I said before, we're going to pull this spring out. And you can see now that I've got the whole assembly sandwiched together with a carriage bolt. Now what we're going to do when we're all done with this, we're actually going to take a flap wheel on the grinder and we're going to ground this domed portion of the back of the carriage bolt, or the head of the carriage bolt, so that it is more flat. That way it won't interfere when it's bolted onto the door of the car, meaning this domed head won't actually make contact with the fiberglass. We do have a set of spacers, but these are not the favorite spacers for Jeff Miller. They have another spacer that they sold, or that they provided with the kits earlier, that have a larger hole here. The problem with this one is the hole. There are these two. The hole here is smaller than the outside portion of this rotating assembly for the handle right here. And if you look at this, you can see that that actual rotating part of the handle projects farther out than the back. That portion of that rotating handle actually projects back past the actual back portion of the handle assembly, or the latch assembly, which, if this comes in contact, it's going to make really hard for this handle or latch to open and close. So Jeff will probably end up putting a set of washers in between this and one of the spacers if he ended up having to use a spacer. You don't always have to use a spacer, but sometimes you do, and in those instances he'll use small, like 3/16 washers on all four corners, in between that and the spacer, and that gives just enough clearance for this all to play happy. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to be provided two of these catches, and these catches are going to be threaded in to these. They're kind of like bat wings. They almost look like they're a prop from the Batman movie. But these aren't needed on the Mark IV. Now, I believe on the FIA car, which is a Mark IV based kit as well, you do need these. So don't throw them away if you have, or if you're working on a 289 FIA car from Factory 5. You may need these, so don't just toss them. But on a standard Mark IV, they're not needed. You can toss them away. They're just heavy and they're not used. So we're going to put those off to the side. And you can see we've prepped these. So they're just in one bag. They're all ready for Jeff. And then we have not only the spacers, but we have a collection of washers. And these washers are meant as spacers for the stem on the catch. So what Jeff will do is he'll stack washers in order to get the catches in the right spot to line up with the latch so it engages this hole that's in the end of the catch. Now, once Jeff's all done and he gets it all aligned, we'll bring those back to our shop. We'll cut one-piece spacers in said bandsaw, and then we'll install those spacers with the doors aligned as Jeff put them on the car, and they'll be fine that way. It gives the latches a cleaner look when everything's all said and done. So what you're going to watch me do next is the initial setup of the carriage bolt inside the door latches. All right, I have the nylock nut and the internal washer taken off, and you can see the outer washer that we have on here actually nests itself around this round portion of the back of the handle mechanism. And what that does is it allows us to put pressure against that so the whole assembly won't come apart, because this handle is separate from that mechanism. And so if you just put a washer on the stem of the carriage bolt right here, all it does is push on the inside. It doesn't put pressure on the outside portion, which is what makes this up right here. So once that washer's on, and you want one that fits just around the outside of that, then we're going to put another flat washer on. That's a 1/4 inch flat washer. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to thread our nylock nut on there for the final time, and it's all ready to go. All right, the next thing we're going to do is, you can see at the end of this pin, I've ground it down. And that is because when this was at the full in position, that projected out past the actual inside flat surface of the latch. You'll have trouble with the catches engaging the pin if you don't file that down. So I've taken a triangular file and I've filed that down so it's smooth and level with that position inside of the latch mechanism. And then what I've gone and done, since the file is triangular shaped, is I've gone around the corners of that pin and just rounded it over so it's better suited to engage the hole in the end of the catch. I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and grab the hardware for both the hood hinges and the trunk hinges, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to clearance those. So all of the holes that get the brass bushings for the hinges, both for the trunk and for the hood, we're going to go ahead, now that they're powder coated, those holes have shrunk in size. We want to make sure that those are still a full ½ inch so that the bushings will go in there and Jeff won't have any problems putting the hinges together. So we're going to go ahead and grab those, and I'll come back and I'll show you exactly what we're going to do to clearance those. One last thing on the door latches. And this applies to both the ones that Factory 5 is supplying now and the older ones that we're using here. Make sure you take some spray white lithium grease, spray the inside of the latch mechanism. So from the top here, you can see there's a spring. We want to make sure that we get plenty of lithium grease on that. We want to activate the pin back and forth with the handle. We want to make sure we get some lubricant in between the pin and the housing so that all slides freely. And then we want to make sure that we get some both on this side of the latch mechanism and on the back side, just to make sure that everything is moving freely and we're not going to have any problems with it binding. All right, so this long slot here, you've got 2 carriage bolts that have to slide on there to make your adjustments. So clean that powder coat off on this side where my thumbnail is, and then this side where my thumbnail is. And then you'll be able to get those carriage bolts to slide freely within there, and you'll be able to adjust your hardware when you go ahead and you mount your trunk deck lid. Now, on the hood hinges, it's all the same. You're going to have a series of holes. You've got some 3/8 holes, and so those need to be drilled out with a 3/8 drill bit. You've got some 5/16 holes that the shoulder bolt threaded side goes through, so those need to be drilled out and clearanced. And then you've got some 1/2 inch holes that you need to drill and clearance as well. These slots aren't as difficult because they're generally a little bit oversized. You can go ahead and go after those with a flat file as well, and then just give yourself a little bit of clearance. What Jeff does is we don't have a whole lot of adjustment that we need to do on these slots because they're not that long, for one. So we'll go ahead and we'll put some axle grease. Basically, Jeff has like a jar or a can of axle grease and a little small like acid brush that he'll brush on some grease. So when we're setting up the hood hinges, there's some movement in these 2 brackets because they overlap side to side for their adjustment. So that pretty much shows you what you got to do as far as clearancing. Basically, you just want to clean out all the powder coat from any of the slots or any of the holes. So when you go ahead and put your hardware together, that you can get everything to move freely so you can get adjusted properly. All right, everybody, a couple days later, and I am in the process of getting everything we need together for Jeff Miller. Now, I've got all of the door latches in here. They're clearanced. I've got all of the hinge pieces for the trunk and for the hood. I have the bulb seal for the trunk, all of the struts, all of the foam. So the larger and the smaller foam, just in case Jeff wants those. I've got the 3 lock set for the hood and the trunk deck lid. I've also grabbed some tools. I've got my electric impact to go ahead and take off the wheels once we get here. And I've got a couple of supplies that I've got hanging around the shop that I'm going to see if Jeff wants. But here's the thing. Whoever's doing your paint, make sure that you get a list of them of everything they want you to bring with you. For instance, I do all the fitment of the roll bar and the windshield here in our shop. I don't burden Jeff with that. So I'm not bringing the roll bar with me. I've already pre-fit it. I know it fits. I haven't drilled it yet because I'm going to wait until we're a little bit farther along and I've got a little bit more room in the shop. So I'm gonna take the roll bar and I'm just gonna leave it here. The windshield is gonna stay here. I do all the fitting and installation of the windshield here at our shop. Jeff isn't gonna have to worry about that. I've got the wiper motor mounted, and we're gonna have Jeff drill the holes, if he hasn't already, for the windshield wiper arms. Then I will do all the final fitting of the actual windshield wipers themselves. So again, anything you think you may need, double check with your painter and make sure that you have everything you need on the day that you go to have the body put on. Again, make sure he has everything when he needs it so that he's not held up as he's trying to put the body back on the car. So I'm gonna leave the cardboard in on the radiator because I don't want any issues with tools or anything else hitting the fins of the radiator. So that'll be something that we'll pull off once we get here. I'll just fold it together, pull it out from the bottom, everything will be fine. One thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull off the heights valve that we temporarily installed down here on the cross member because I don't want that to be in Jeff's way. When we get to his shop, I'll not only take that off, but I'll have this off once we get the car into his shop so that he has access to get all of these hinges, both this side and the other side, because he's gonna actually get those from the bottom. So we wanna make sure that he doesn't have any issues or any clearance items so that he can get the hood adjusted properly. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take this, even though Jeff's got the other part of this, and I'm gonna put it with all our other parts, and we don't need to take that with us. So I think that's gonna wrap things up on this one. I'm gonna go ahead and make a separate video for our trip down to Jeff Miller's, and it'll be the same thing we've kind of done before. If I see anything that I haven't mentioned before, I'll go ahead and I will mention that in the next video. Until then, if you're enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.